Oh, well, Charlie Kirk. Familiar with him?
You say whatever you need to say, Stephen. I'll be listening to you as I always do, but feel free to say whatever you need to say.
All right, this time it was a PDF. Okay, something wicked this way comes was considered to be part of something called the Greentown series, which was a series of novels which tended to happen in the same town. Wasn't familiar with that. I had seen the title Dandelion Wine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really find this sort of illustration very pleasing.
Yeah.
I looked up the artist. He seems to be in the sort of op art sort of stuff and montages or whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, it's sort of like, you look at the characters and your mind's getting scattered. It's the opposite, say, of Donald Duck, which sort of draws you in and focuses on the characters.
Sure. Sure. No, it's one of Bradbury's best known stories, all in all.
Now, this was an official comic adaptation. I don't know of any others.
I don't either. Guess it just means they got him to do the introduction and agree to the. I don't know. I have no idea. I presume he must have owned the rights.
Oh, well, true professional. Any dollar's a good dollar.
He worked in Hollywood. I'm assuming he must have had a good agent.
Well, this was, I was captivated a bit by the movie, which
Hmm.
I think I saw a TV review of it. And then the movie seemed to have bombed. So I never saw it on the big screen. I think I saw it on TV or online or something like that at some point.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure it was playing somewhere when I was a kid, and I would just see it. But when I was a child, I've told you this before. I ju- I just paid very little attention to anything that was live action, other than Sesame Street. Sesame Street, I made an exception for. But if it was live action, I just didn't care. It was just cartoons, animation. With there were a few other exceptions. Yeah.
Okay, so the guy comes around with a lightning rod,
And 40 years later, little has changed. 45.
which in the movie version, the lightning storm was what was going to make the ghost disappear, but it's not the original story.
The movie changed a lot, didn't it? Yeah. I think that's what happened. The producers kept changing things here and there, what to their liking. And then eventually they turned around and realized they had changed so much incrementally that now it just didn't make any sense. What they had, they couldn't resolve what they had with Bradbury's original story. They changed so much that now it made absolutely no sense, and they didn't know what to do. That's the story I heard.
Well, of course, the story of ghosts invading a town. I think there's a lot of somebody told me there's a lot of Chinese stories
Hmm.
built on that principle. There was the Scandinavian legend that the Norse gods were running around as a carnival troop looking for to take hold of people's souls. And the god Thor was seen as a Balaam and Bailey style figure in the 19th century.
Hmm.
Has anyone read the novel? I started reading it. I thought it was very interesting. It's got more humor in it. It just seems more like a story, whereas the movie just seemed to be, more conflicted, like people were in conflict with one another.
I haven't read any of the novel. This is probably the first time this cartoon here. It was probably the first time I took taking in something was probably closer to the novel story than the movie was. Of
The
course,
novel, the
movie.
novel,
Sorry.
the novel was well received. So how it turned into a bad movie, I'm not quite sure. I guess they were trying to make it scarier and more disturbing than the novel.
Uh, I think there's limitations in the movie that you have a limited amount of time to display your images. And of course, stuff gets cut. You know, if they're trying to tell a story, it ends up being too long and they have to cut stuff out to keep it within their normal viewing sort of time. I actually enjoyed the movie. I thought it was the imagery and it was quite good. This sort of big sort of it seems to be linked. There's a link there with in the novel with the a story from the Illustrated Man. So you have Mr. Dark, who was the Illustrated Man, and you've got the Dust Witch. Which I think in the Illustrated Man you have a witch, which is the one that draws the illustrations on him and entraps his soul. But I suppose these green town stories reflect uh, Bradbury's early childhood. So whereabouts was he? I forget what town now.
Waukegan, Illinois, wasn't it?
Illinois, right? Yeah.
Waukegan.
Yeah, I think at the time when he was young, they had these carnivals traveling around the country, and I think he's mentioned that a few times.
Yeah. They used to have not just frills, but they'll have scientific lectures in the carnivals as well. You know, somebody might be carrying fossils or something like that around them with them. And of course, there was a point, and you go far back enough, and there was a point where there was no media beyond the newspapers. radio was something which came in after World War One. Oh, unless you go for gramophone records. And of course, we live in a world that's saturated by media. I mean, even as a kid, myself in the 60s, I lived in a very different world, 60s and 70s.
Yeah, well, Bradbury had all those magazines, and I guess they call them pulp fiction, the comic books and the short stories published every month. I believe he read those regularly.
He said something about collecting comics back in 1929, whether it was Buck Rogers and Buck Rogers or something similar like that. And then the other children in school gave him a hard time. And he destroyed the few comics he got, but then he went back to collecting them again later on. The message in this story is people from the outside are wicked. Keep away from them. They come from out of town. They can only be evil. I suppose the philosopher Kierkegaard would point out that children live in an aesthetics sort of persona, very involved with their personal space, their own feelings, and are not built for larger responsibilities or direction in life. So their world is the world of a child. And that's what he seems to be reflecting here. Oh, yeah. The Bayeux Tapestry, there's a bit of a debate about it. So apparently the plan is to ship it to London for an extended exhibition. But there's people in France that don't like the idea.
So is that tapestry part of the national identity of France, or is it just a historical object?
I don't know exactly what the French regard for it is. It's probably more important in terms of English history than French history. But they feel the article should remain in Bayeux, where it's apparently on some sort of display, and they don't want it shipped out of France for any length of time. That's right. I saw something recently. Some guy, was looking at the posture of the archers in the Bayeux Tapestry and was convinced that there was a different style of archery in use. One, for example, where you grip the arrow with 3 fingers rather than pull on the string. His claim was this tends to produce a more accurate shot.
Mm.
And you can run around sort of shooting people like it's a gun or something like that, which can't say I fully understand or fully comprehend.
Yeah, if you're running around with it, you do have to hold the arrow. Because if it's just up against the string, it's not going to stay in place. But if you want to run around with it, you got to hold on to the arrow.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah, okay. He climbs up a tree. Okay. I don't know if this bit's in the book, so he's looking through somebody's window and he sees a woman in a state of undress and a husband about to mount her. Okay, this was the wild kid. So you had the the more down to earth kid and the one that's more edgy. And when Jim looked down, at last he saw Will and a stranger below with some silly requests to come down to earth. Will, please. We've been to the library, ain't that enough? Carry these for me. Who's that? Natalia was a big fan of Charlie Kirk. There's this other guy I know called Vidura, is from Sri Lanka. He's quite curious about the whole thing. He writes such long passages. The Light Group. Okay, so his kids are wandering around town. I see an ad for the carnival. It's not true anyway. Carnivals don't come this late in the year. Yeah, but what about the licorice and cotton candy? We smell close. So that's the interesting thing. Do for kids, are carnivals sinister? Are they sinister for adults? Yeah, I didn't get this bit. I missed out on the wording here. Just got too mushed up in this particular line because I'm using this particular background for the writing. Not that I figure I'd miss terribly much.
Yeah.
Cougar and Dark. Okay, the mysterious comes in on the train. In the movie, they have a quite interesting picture of the carriage with the dust switch in it. That train looked ancient, Civil War looking. The whales of a lifetime were gathered in it from other nights, in other slumbering years, the howl of moon-dreamed dogs, the seep of river-cold winds through January porch screens, which stopped the bloods. 1,000 fire sirens weeping, or worse, the outgone shreds of breath. The protests of 1 billion people dead or dying, not wanting to be dead, their groans, their sighs burst over the earth. Well, the world was a pretty good place for Anglo-Saxons back then because they, for example, didn't suffer from the things like World War One or World War Two directly that much. So the Anglo-Saxons were having a gilded life. Okay, here comes the balloon. The carnival set up in a short space of time. Charlie is still going on about Charlie Kirk. Which, stitched and sewn by some great monster, shadow made canvas and more canvas as the tint took shape. Okay, they meet their teacher. I cheated and had a look at what Copilot had to say about it. Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Come is more than just a spooky tale about a sinister carnival. It's a haunting meditation on temptation, aging, fear, and the battle between good and evil. The fear of aging and lost youth. The carnival preys on people's desire to reclaim youth or escape the burdens of age. Mr. Dark offers illusions of eternal youth, but they come at the cost of one's soul. Bradbury explores how obsession with lost time can lead to spiritual decay. Okay, for all you melancholies out there who reflect too much on your childhood, spiritual decay. As a point made about the melancholic sort of temperament, tends to often think very much about their childhoods. Now, some people have no regard for their childhood experience. We're all fools all the time, just we're a different kind each day. Charles Holloway, The Dead. The enemy is fear. We think it is hate, but it is fear. So the town gets tempted by the carnival, travelling carnival. Okay, the merry-go-round, which changes one's age. Mr. Dark. Giving out free rides. What does that remind you of? Free deals. Come into my parlour. Okay, so Cougar has turned into a young boy. In one of the stories which this was based on, he had the young boy go in to steal stuff. I think that was the ambition, to pretend to be the nephew of the elderly woman and then steal stuff. Oh, I might have to try the book one day. I might try an audio book. Okay, got a thing with marbles there. Okay, he's using the marbles to wake his fellow up. You want, I'm older. You want it to go forward, don't you, Jim? Forward instead of back. You're on it once around and you're 15, circling and you're 16, 3 times more and 19, music. And you're 20 and off standing again. Not Jim anymore. Still 13, almost 14 on the empty midway with me, small, me young, me scared. Okay, they had the fight with Cougar at some point. And he gets stuck on the merry-go-round and gets turned into something that looks almost mummified. Okay, got some of the carnival characters, the bearded lady. The Siamese twins. And Cougar has turned into Mr. Electro. Yeah, certain images as art, it's okay. It just doesn't look very good for a comic. What do you reckon, David?
Man, it didn't really excite me, to be honest.
Yeah, well, this is a story it probably needed, really very good artists to bring out the best in it. The Dust Witch.
I think that's one of the dangers when you, do a series, like a film series or a literature series or anything, art series, is there's a danger of getting a perceptual bias because you're only focusing on the good stuff. You only focus on the high quality stuff, and it kind of skews your perception. You don't realize, yeah, you're only looking at the top 5% or 7% of quality of what's out there. Vast majority of stuff is not that great, but when you're paying attention to a long series on film or literature, well, you don't pay attention to that stuff, so it gives you the wrong idea. Most stuff is not that great. The famous thing with Ted Sturgeon, who somebody in an interview, in a convention appearance, came up to him and asked a question, said, Mr. Sturgeon, I've looked at an overview of science fiction, and it occurs to me, and what I found was 90% of science fiction is garbage. And Ted Sturgeon said 90% of everything is garbage.
Okay, well, yes. What survives and is acclaimed in media is the best stuff.
Well, I know that Ray Bradbury looked at a lot of garbage and he actually made an effort to improve it because there were a lot of comics about going to Mars and the Martians taking over the psyche of astronauts. But Bradbury wanted to give it a little extra, I don't know, a sense that they were entering a different world and that they would look at themselves, the astronauts would see themselves in a different way. So he was trying to give a different dimension to the whole story about going to Mars in the Bradbury or the Martian Chronicles.
Yeah, it's sort of like he was mixing mysticism and occultism into science fiction.
Yeah, and it's based on his comic book reading in those illustrated magazines that he read as he's growing up. Because if you look at the science fiction magazines, you'll see all kinds of stories about aliens taking over people's minds and creatures invading the earth and all that kind of thing. And he thought that there was a way of making the story interesting to a literary public, not just keep it as, as a comic book, but the story could be expanded into something more interesting.
Yeah. I probably my appreciation of science fiction isn't great enough. Of course, in Lovecraft, you have perhaps an emerging of science fiction and horror. Well, certainly sort of a mystical element coming in rather than, all right, astronauts going rocket ship,
Yeah, I
fly
think
to
that
Mars, land
yeah,
on Mars.
the science fiction started out that way, and it's become more rational over time. In the last few decades, science fiction is about surviving on another planet. It's not really about engaging some unknown entities. I mean, there's a couple movies that are, but the thing is the it's either you get a science fiction where the space travelers are dealing with evil monsters or they're dealing with rational beings. With Ray Bradbury, you kind of got something in between that.
Yeah, I remember because I was just watching movies mainly as a kid. I did sort of read sort of a few mainstream science fiction novels. I think I do remember one by a British author, which has Earth or the spaceship sort of invaded by ghosts, and they want to get to Earth, and somehow they stop the ghosts. There's one that they called Seven to Uranus. It was, I think, an early 60s movie, sort of quite famous. And you got guys, they land on Uranus and they find sort of like their hometown there, which is basically something out of a Bradbury story. And there's some sort of brain creature living down in a tunnel, which is creating these illusions for them, sort of aiming to destroy them somehow. Here's Matalia again. You may think I'm too sentimental, but this is the first time I've actually teared up for a dead activist. I mean, it's kind of like how your mum mourned on the passing of JFK, Steve. I watched Charlie's videos a lot back then, and even though at times I felt uncomfortable with what he said, but not many would have the same bravery as him to delivering the truth. I keep on telling Matalia she should get back to her hobbies or something to keep her mind focused, but she's just a bit into wandering around these days. You know, she's sort of not, you know, she used to have the things like she was trying to work on comic images and stuff like that. And she said she just doesn't have the motivation. And I was sort of trying to tell her that you need some type of a project to keep yourself focused.
Yeah.
Back. Okay, so yeah, it's sort of the tension between a guy who's manipulative and an adult world that doesn't quite recognize his manipulation, only the kid sees it. I dubbed the asses and fools. I dubbed the Mr. Sickly and Mr. Pale. A short, sad life for you both. I suppose if you reminisce too much about your childhood, that your life becomes a sort of ghost world. Okay, creep. All right, they're coming in the room. The teacher's there. The dad's the one that doesn't fall for the temptations. Okay, the dust witch is back in her balloon. Thump, she goes on top of the house and leaves sort of slime there, which they wash off. Okay, he's got the bow and arrow. The dust witch is blind, but she can smell and sense a presence. You must have had the same dream, but balloons, you don't have funerals for them, do you? Jim, the balloon last night, all alone, Jim, someone's crying. That voice, I know it. Will, don't go there. And so they find their teacher's been turned into a little kid. She wanted to relive her childhood. Who'll believe? Go to the teacher's house and find she's missing. Okay, the carnival's doing their parade at the same time looking for the boys. Okay, I thought it was set in the 1920s, but that phone's a bit 1950s. I'm looking for two boys. Okay. Oh, this is a bit when they're hiding down behind the grate. And he has the tattoos of the boys' heads on his palm of his hands.
This carnival character looks like the character from There Will Be Blood, the movie. I forgot the guy's name.
Oh, that famous actor.
Yeah, he just
Yeah.
looked like him. He's got the same kind of characteristics.
Well, he didn't look quite that savage in some of his other movies, but There
No.
Will Be
Oh,
Blood.
Daniel Day-Lewis, when he played There Will Be Blood, he reminds me of this character here.
Yeah, well, he had the mustache.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember.
Well, he was Hawkeye in Last of the Mohicans. That
Yep.
was a bit different. Age of Innocence, I quite enjoyed that movie, if you recall that one.
Yep, I remember that one too. Yeah, he did pretty good movies.
Yeah, he says he's given up on movies now. Had enough of them. Yeah, There Will Be Blood. I was just watching TV. Oh God, how long ago was it now? Don't know now. Maybe it was 15, 20 years ago. And I was just flicking through channels and I started watching a bit of There Will Be Blood and I thought I was a bit dull. Went over to something else which was worse and went back to There Will Be Blood. Yeah, it's sort of a movie that sort of sucks you in as it goes along. And ends up with a rather powerful ending.
Oh, remember that he did the Gangs of New York. He was really good in that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, he had the mustache there as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's I remember he was they said that when he performed, he wouldn't come out of his performance. He would stay in character even when he had time off.
yeah, they call that a method actor.
Yeah.
So he gets stuck, with the persona. So, he goes and sits in a room and starts to imagine himself what would it be like to be that guy and getting the character. Anyway, the dad starts to read some archives and find out that the carnivals appeared periodically in the past. A history of circuses, carnivals, and shadow shows by demons possessed, torments of the damned, the witch's Sabbath, and pacts with demons. So he's reading all these books. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. So do you get any pricks in your hands or your thumbs or your fingers? I think I've noticed it walking in the supermarket a few times. It's the line out of, what was it, Macbeth or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But I'm wondering if this story has anything to do with Macbeth. I couldn't really quite notice it.
As far as I understand, Shakespeare set the standard for a lot of future fiction. And also, he introduced a huge amount of words into the English language, apparently.
Because that line I think is stated by one of the three witches, but we don't get three witches here.
No, you just get the dust witch. So it's saying if you feel a pricking in your thumbs, it's a warning. Like I said, I've sort of felt it on occasions myself. Okay, yeah, right. A line spoken by the second witch in Act 4, Scene 1 of William Shakespeare's Macbeth. The phrase signifies a supernatural premonition of evil, as the pricking suggests an intuitive physical sensation of foreboding, and it foreshadows Macbeth's arrival, who has become a figure of profound wickedness and inhumanity by going into the play.
Yeah, some people think that the play Macbeth was trying to, deal with Macbeth's sense of his self and his, that he wasn't necessarily wicked. He was, in some ways, may have been manipulated by the witches. I mean, that's probably what Bradbury was trying to deal with.
Yeah, well, I don't know Macbeth that well. I haven't studied it, so I couldn't really say anything about it. They say it reflected very much the feelings that James I had of England, who was quite preoccupied with the idea of witches trying to do him in. I think he had trouble sailing to Denmark or something like that to pick up his bride. And this story went around that it was witches that were causing the problems of the sea travel.
Yeah, what's interesting about Macbeth is that the witches were like fortune tellers. They were predicting his future. And in some ways, that was inspiring him to do evil. But, the witches claim that he is already evil. They're just predicting the future. So it's a debate there. I think this story by Bradbury is kind of working with that.
No, it's a thing in philosophy that the Christian church was influenced by the ideas of predestination. They figured since God was all powerful, he must know everything that's going to happen in the future. And if he knows everything that's going to happen in the future, then it's set. So it's already determined who are the damned and who are the saved. And so, in a sense, it's as though Macbeth is doomed by predestination. So, what other sort of legends and that have you delved into, Jason?
Legends involving Shakespeare or Bradbury?
Oh, well, anything.
I probably know too much, too many stories. I mean, I know most of Shakespeare's plays and read different stories, trying to deal with these issues involving, are people essentially good or are they essentially just pawns in a game?
Yeah, I go for the pawns in a game theory. I get the feeling that I'm not, you might say I'm a bit of a polytheist. And so I don't go with the idea of the Christians' idea of a monotheistic God, but I believe that there are sort of spiritual agencies which are determining our fate. And I think, am I capable of creating my own fate? I get the feelings that the ideas that I've come up with can get pretty lame. And so I think that I'm pretty much subject to forces that are more powerful than anything I can create.
Is it predestination, or you're just a pawn?
I don't believe so much in predestination in an absolute sense. I think a person could make relative choices, but of course your choices are within a set of limits. For example, it's unlikely I could turn into an eagle and fly around, so that's not a choice I can make. My choices are limited to what I'm capable of. So I don't believe in sort of any sort of absolute determinism. I think people can make relative choices. Charlie has sent me a picture of Jesus hugging Charlie Kirk. Well done, my humble and faithful servant. Matthew 25:23. Still going on about Charlie Kirk. Yep, by God, look here. Cougar and Dark, but it couldn't be the same men. 1846. Same ad, same name, same initials. Once every 20, 30 or 40 years. So people forget. Where do they come from? Who are they? Maybe a man walked around 1,000,000 years ago stuffing himself with other people's unhappiness. All those years, you think Mr. Cougar, Mr. Dark are both a couple of 100 years old? Riding around that merry-go-rounds, they can shave off a year or two anytime they want, right? Why then? They could live forever and hurt people, but why? Why all the hurt? Because you need fuel, gas, something to run a carnival on, don't you? Maybe this carnival survives living off the poison of the sins we do each other and the ferment of our most terrible regrets. Okay, Mr. Dark is walking in the front door. The kids hide in the bookshelves, but he finds them. How old are you now, Jason?
What's the question?
How old are you now?
I'm 56.
Okay, I'm 65. I think I'm beginning to notice now that it's almost a feeling like I'm a character of myself. And I think you catch your sense of limitations when you apply yourself to projects. When you're a kid, the world seems a lot more real. You feel more satisfied with it.
I found it kind of mysterious.
What, when you're a kid?
Yeah, when I was young, I thought things don't make much sense. You have to try to figure them out.
Oh, that's curious. I didn't really find the world's mysterious, but I tended to dwell on my own little world a bit. So, I suppose if you struck outside your own persona and tried to find out what made people tick, you'd find things going against your grain. Dust Witch is back. Okay, they discovered by laughing a lot that they scare some of the evil spirits away. there was an episode of Star Trek a bit like that when there's sort of energy creature invaded the Enterprise and had the Klingons and the Starfleet personnel fighting each other. They're going to do the bullet trick. And the father shoots the dust witch. So somehow by changing their mood, so Mr. Dark turns himself into one of the kids. But then he disappears and they get the kid's body back. And they find a way of reviving the kid back to life by the looks of things, do they? Jim don't remember he was dead, so he won't tell. Not now, someday, sure not, but not. So they dance around to dispel the evil with joy. And walking back on the railroad tracks. Then as the moon watched, the three of them together left the wilderness behind and walked into the town. Well, that's the end of that one. So this was in a place called Greentown, and there seems to be a whole load of books which are based in Greentown for the sake of the stories. Oh, okay. Something about Charlie Kirk.
I read that one of his family members wants to see him get the death penalty. Did anyone read that?
Oh, the
I mean Tyler, I mean the assassin.
you mean whose family?
Tyler, what I forget his last name, Tyler something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Robinson is the
Right.
assassin, and yeah, they're seeking the death penalty, and Utah does have a death penalty.
It's his family members or the Charlie Kirk family member?
The state, the FBI, they're all seeking. Trump wants it.
Oh, well, emotional reaction, I suppose. Give it some time. It was a bit of a shock. Like I said, I didn't quite crack up, but of course, it was a sort of familiar figure.
I expected Kirk to be shot at some point because he didn't have much security around him. I figured it's going to happen sooner or later because they can't attack Trump. He's too well protected. Whereas Kirk had like 6 security guards near him. I mean, he had very little protection.
There were police as well.
Yeah, I
but
think
it's not
6
the same
campus
sort of.
6 officers. Yeah.
It's not the same sort of stuff you'd get for the president now. I'd predict that now they can't infiltrate the forces protecting Trump. That they're going to have to do something extraordinary to assassinate him, which means they'll have to get, say, perhaps somebody in Congress or a Congress aide to use something like a plastic gun on him at close range.
Well, they
Or-
almost got him at the golf range or golf course. This group that were hiding in the golf course.
Yeah. Well, that was some distance from him. He still didn't get that close to the shooter. But I think maybe they've pretty much cleaned things up. The other alternative of whoever wants to get him would have to commit more or less a small military group to break through his security. But those are two scenarios, which means the assassination attempt is going to be traced back to the parties involved.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they could get a pardon if Trump is assassinated, that the people involved could get pardoned by the next administration, which is quite likely. It's this is following the pattern of a downturn you see in other eras where there was sort of like a political system, but each side would jump into the political realm and use the rules and the laws as a weapon against the other side. I think the Wars of the Roses were another example. The fall of the Roman Republic was another example, but it's impressive compared to, I don't know, Jason, what even you knew in your childhood, is the amounts of vitriol between the two sides now.
Well, it might not be too bad this time around, the next election, because JD Vance seems to be really in place and nobody's complaining about him yet. In fact, nobody talks about him at all. And it's possible he could be the next president for 8 years because he's being set up for that.
Yeah, I'd imagine that Trump would get assassinated and the Democrats would be back in office after that at some point. Because I just think it's, the public will vote in one group and then they'll vote in the next group, and each of the groups will use their position of power to attack the other. So that's your scenario. You think JD Vance will make it as the next president?
Well, I don't know for sure, but at this point, it doesn't seem like the Democrats are offering anything to counter him. And in one more year or a year and a half, they're going to start campaigning for the next election. It's not much time left.
Well, there's not much planet left either. It's a very heavily populated world, so everybody's struggling to get a chunk of it now.
Well, at least we don't have to worry about the uprising in the Capitol when Trump leaves.
Oh, okay. Jan 6.
I mean, because Trump could have claimed that he has to stay in the White House because of the emergency situation. I don't know. Ukraine or the leftists are too violent. Maybe he could argue that, oh, he's got to stay in office a little longer. But with JD Vance coming in, he probably doesn't really care.
Well, I was rather surprised that Trump was so sort of became a bit extreme when he claims illicit moves to steal the election, which I don't know about. But in his position, I would have stepped back. I mean, unless you've got a whole load of people on your side. When even his vice president was against him there, well, you can believe that the election has been stolen and you might be right, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. And sometimes you just got to step back. Even more surprising is his comeback. You'd be sort of struggling to sort of expect that occurring. A media post from the left saying Joe Rogan, J.K. Rowling, Ben Shapiro, and Matt Walsh are next. More than one man on roof. Others involved text messages, pre and hostess. Oh, well, okay. Don't know about that. A little bit. So if it was a conspiracy, there's nothing to say that the gunman wasn't the guy all along anyway, because you ever seen a movie called Day of the Jackal with Edward Fox? And
I
you
have
got,
not seen that one, no.
oh yeah,
Put it in the link, Stephen. I'll check it
okay.
out.
That's sort of like the classic movie based on a book about an assassination. But the thing, you sort of peek through it, and this assassin he's just so cool, he's so charming, he's so wonderful. And you look at somebody like Lee Harvey Oswald, who I believe was the assassin, and he's a bit of a basket case, but why would an asset have to be some super charming super cool character? All you need is somebody who can shoot. And I don't see that there's a problem. Who knows? Maybe these kids, they can shoot, but they've been cultivated for the job. It's very easy to sway a young person's mind. I mean, when you get older, you've seen a bit of BS. But, you're young, maybe some guy comes out in dark clothing and says, you're the man that's going to save America. We want you to assassinate this guy. I think that was the case with possibly the case with Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, I knew the comparison with JFK assassination is gonna happen. Already there's all these questions about who shot Kirk, and there a conspiracy behind it, and just like like with Oswald. And now, why didn't that happen with that other guy? I can't remember his name now. Luigi, when he killed the insurance executive, there were no conspiracies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Nobody was suggesting there was a conspiracy involved there. Yeah,
they
I
just
don't know. I'd imagine a presidential shooting, you've got a very good chance of a conspiracy. But with somebody like Charlie Kirk, don't know. Maybe it's just the lone gunman. A kid gets some strange idea he's going to assassinate somebody. But the price is you might be clever enough to get in, take your shot, and luck would have it. You get your target, but getting out of it's the hard bit. It's amazing he got as far as he did, the kid. So it seems he told his parents, told his dad or something like that, and his dad turned him in.
Yeah, I don't think Tyler is going to get the same support that Luigi got from the public. This is probably not going to go well for him in court.
Yeah, it's amazing actually that the mad public is willing to support a murder because they don't like the guy.
There might be people that don't like Kirk or his views, but I don't think they really supported the idea of him being killed. Whereas Luigi's victim, people were just, kind of, probably deserved it kind of attitude.
But Ben,
Yeah, I'll post a bit of a video of the Day of the Jackal when the French underground is hiring the Jackal as the assassin. And this is, this is just how fiction operates. Fiction creates a world of unreality, which is just so cool and so seductive. And that's fiction's main role, is to entertain. And Edward Fox, well, if you're a lady, you're going to be quite charmed by Edward Fox, the actor. Yeah, well, I did remake Day of the Jackal with trying to remember who it was. An American remake of a British film, which was just horrible. Just had none of the charm of the original British film. I think there's a series. That's right. There is. In recent years, there's been a series based on the theme of the Day of the Jackal. So there was a movie back in the 1990s. Okay, the remake was a 1997 film. Right, Bruce Willis played the part of the Jackal. And Richard Gere played the part of the cop that was trying to track him down. If you get the chance, Ariel, I'd very much recommend the 70s version of the Day of the Jackal. It's really up there with a good, very entertaining movie.
Okay. 70s version. Okay.
Yeah. Well, if you want to laugh, after you've seen the 70s version, watch the 90s American version. Just how bad it is by comparison to just trying to think now who Day of the Jackal. Okay. So was it based on a book originally? Okay, Frederick Forsyth. Okay, Day of the Jackal, Frederick Forsyth. Okay, so it was a top-selling book. Oh, if I had the time, I'd read the book.
Yeah, I see that. I've never read that author before, I don't think. Forsyth?
His big, it's a bit of a big name, like back in the 60s or something like that. It's like you saw, a line of books by the same author, like you see with some people today. Okay, died June 2025. Day of the Jackal, The Odessa File, The Fourth Protocol, Dogs of War, The Devil's Alternative, The Fist of God, Icon, The Veteran, Avenger, The Afghan, The Cobra. By 2006, he had sold more than 70 million books in 30 languages. Well, what do you reckon, Dave? Will Phil show up next microcosm? It's amazingly how well it went without Phil jumping in all the time. So it actually, you got fewer through a few paragraphs. No, we read the works of Kenneth Smith at another meeting, and it's taking quite a long time to get through them. You get a lot of people who just have to yar on in circumstances which are not suited to yarring on. Yeah, if you're in a meeting with spare time, fair enough. But certain types of meeting doesn't suit, but you just get a lot of people who think they can discover philosophy by purely being introspective on their own mind without realizing, as I think I've discovered now, it is a discipline. He could be a scapegoat, a pansy. No, that's Patsy, isn't it? You might have to,
Sorry, yeah, that's a typo with
you might have
Patsy.
to edit that one.
Yeah, Pansy is a little different.
That was Oswald's claim about himself. Patsy means somebody who's been set up. Doesn't mean he denied he was the shooter, but he was led to believe. I get the feeling Oswald thought he was part of a team, and of course, when they were finished with him, he was let go. He was probably expecting an extraction. Yeah, I used to love the science fiction stuff when I was a kid. It was probably science fiction was my favourite. Now, the science fiction dreams died a bit. I tend to prefer medieval stuff, I suppose. I used to like pirate movies, like them a lot. So I used to like Arabian Nights style movies, all that sort of stuff. The one movie I loved as a kid was The Wizard of Baghdad, I think it was called. Now, of course, I realise as David knows the actor very well. 1960 it was. Dick Shawn, that's the man. I wasn't sure whether he was a good actor or a bad actor. It's a bit hard to tell. I think he was doing a very bad act in the movie Evil Roy Slade, although I greatly enjoyed Evil Roy Slade.
I wonder if this is I mean they really want Trump, right? So yeah, I wonder if this isn't one of those cartels or Venezuela. So you just kill 11 drug smugglers on a boat.
Yeah, well, that's always a possibility. Yeah, well, I suppose somebody believes that they'll gain advantage from the death of Trump. He signifies. There's a word, people always say the word meaning, but it's connected with the word to signify as well. So do we really say that something has no meaning, or does it have no significance? So an assassination in this case might have significance for somebody.
Yeah, it's in the drug cartel's interest to get rid of right-wing politicians, right? Left wing
Uh,
is left wing is okay because they're gonna let them do whatever they want.
You might be right. On the surface, it looks like Trump's making it bad for business. Oh, well, for Jason's benefit, I was just discussing something medieval lately. You ever heard of the anarchy, Jason?
What's the question about anarchy?
Yeah, there was a period in English history they called the anarchy.
Oh,
I should dig that out for you.
it seemed like every century had that quality to it.
This one was a bit worse, I think. It's interesting because when they finally, the anarchy was stopped, it was the Sex Pistols, Anarchy in the UK as well. The Anarchy, they call it the Anarchy. The Anarchy was a civil war in England and Normandy between the years 1138 and 1153. The famous case was the death of the heir prince on the White Ship disaster. So a ship sank and he was drowned, and he was the only male heir. And there was a female heir, but they didn't readily accept female heirs at the time. And the Parliament chose, I think, her cousin Stephen as king, and then she
Oh, yeah.
challenged it.
Yeah, I heard of. Yeah, with Queen Matilda. I mean Queen Maud.
Yeah,
There was
yeah,
a fight between Queen Maud and King Stephen.
yeah. They say Empress Matilda, also known as Empress Maud.
That was the
She's
first time a woman tried to rule England. And although she had support to some extent, she couldn't overrule Stephen. Yeah,
they got they
Queen
made it.
Maud, Queen Maud's husband died. Is that the one that died in the ship? I don't remember the story.
No, her brother. She was married to one of the Holy Roman emperors or something like that, and he
Well,
died.
yeah, she was married several times though. I think maybe I'm not getting it straight because she went from being the Queen of England and then married again and became the Empress of the Holy Roman Empire. And she's also in my family tree, and
Oh,
Stephen
great.
is too.
So you have to figure out which DNA in you is the imperious DNA.
The only problem with giving DNA is that then everyone else can look at it too. When they have these like services where you can have your DNA checked and then they tell everyone who you're related to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, became Holy Roman Empress. Henry V was King of Germany and Holy Roman Emperor. Okay, died in 1125, so she must have married him when he was pretty old. So, well, for those days anyway. Oh, okay. So it was about 45 when he died, which was pretty old in those days, apparently. And so she was widowed. Okay, usually for spouses. Oh, okay, right. Married in 1114. Her husband died in 1125. And then she married Geoffrey, the Count of Anjou. And so her son was Henry II, King of England. Now, about 10 years after Henry II, Henry came to the throne. He instituted trial by jury throughout England, which is quite interesting. So it's an interesting thing that trial by jury was possibly an outcome of the anarchy, that he was looking for a way to strengthen civil society. They borrowed that from the Vikings. The Vikings had 36 jurors. And with the Vikings, if you were put on a jury, you had to enforce the law afterwards. So if the guy was, say, exiled, you, the jury, had to go around to his house and make him leave, or make him think it's very good for his health to leave. So the jury was in fact a small army to enforce whatever particular case they'd done. Now Henry II reduced the size to 12 jurors. So I thought you might be interested in that, Jason. That thought that the jury system was an outcome of the anarchy as it was instituted in England later on.
Yeah, I know that during that time, you're talking about the anarchy. I think they were calling it that because you had two armies going against each other, and there was a debate about who's supposed to be the next leader of England, and I forgot exactly what the argument was. You know, Queen Maud thought that she was entitled to it, but no one else seen a woman rule England before, so that there was a lot of opposition to that.
A she-wolf, they called her.
You know,
Woman not being what a woman should be. Well, as the authorities were going at each other, of course, must have been a great deal of lawlessness going on, which couldn't be corrected because the authorities were in turmoil. So
yeah, it could look like lawlessness to one group and then lawfulness to the other. Depends on who you're supporting. That was the confusion, I think, because you couldn't tell who was on Stephen's side and who's on Maud's side. They're all the same English people.
Oh, well, I think we've dealt with this subject, so we're back to Donald Duck next week. A much saner figure. Donald Duck is just your average Joe who's trying to advance himself in the world, trying to get along when he needs money, and when he's got too much money, he bludgers. Always been upstaged by his cousin Gladstone, who has all the luck. So poor old Donald's always running from behind. So yeah, Donald, just average Joe American of the 1930s, 40s. Nothing too heavy.
My favorite comics.
Did any great philosophical discovery occur with Donald Duck, or some cultural discovery?
You're going to have to be more specific than that, Jason. That's pretty vague. That's pretty vague.
Well, what do people claim the importance of Donald Duck in American culture? What's his importance?
Well, that was it. It was a time. Donald Duck reflects America in the 20s and 30s and 40s.
Mm.
And what people expected out of life, what they were looking for. Just your average Joe is who Donald was.
It's a very famous book by Ariel Dorfman.
Donald Duck psychoanalyzed.
Cancel. Window. How to Read Donald Duck, Imperialist Ideology in the Disney Comic by Ariel Dorfman.
Oh, crap, we've been exposed. Anybody who wants to live by the standards of the 2030s, the golden eras of flippin' America, for the common man, is a flippin' fascist.
Quite a famous book, actually. Quite notorious.
Oh, righty, yeah, you could chuck in a link for that one, could you, Dave? Maybe we've looked at it before.
It's not out of the question that we might consider doing that book. Depends on your interest,
well,
I guess.
The special source of Marxism, the master plan of Marxism is to introduce politics into every aspect of life, even areas of life which don't need politics. Nothing will escape. They'll make rules about everything.
That's the case with every ideology. We've talked about this before. The three ideologies that rule the modern world are, of course, Christianity, capitalism, and science. Every one of those ideologies thinks they're the only ideology that exists and looks at everything that exists in the world through their own set of glasses. Everything has a capitalist interpretation if you're a capitalist. Everything has a scientific interpretation if you're a scientist. Everything has a Christian interpretation if you're a Christian. To the exclusion of all the others. And that's pretty much the story of mankind. I keep telling you to read Kenneth Smith's essay on ideology. But in order to do that, you'd have to actually purchase the book.
Oh, rightio, okay.
Because I don't have a scan of it. It's worth reading.
Well, politics deals with the social aspect, where people meet each other. Other aspects they call the cultural, which in a sense is just your own inner imaginative or spiritual inclination. And another aspect is the economic, and you can't really order the economic that easily. There's things which work and things that don't. So you can't make an absolute policy about economics, because deals with stuff which is real, whether it exists or not. Okay, yeah, I have to have a look at that. So it's Donald Duck Analysed. What was the name of that title?
As I said, it's not out of the question that we might cover this. How to Read Donald Duck, Imperialist Ideology in the Disney Comic. First published in 1971, How to Read Donald Duck shocked readers by revealing how capitalist ideology operates in our most beloved cartoons, having survived bonfires, impounding, and being dumped into the ocean by the Chilean army. This controversial book is once again back on our shelves, written and published during the blossoming of Salvador Allende's revolutionary socialism in Chile. The book examines how Disney products reflect capitalist ideology and are active agents working in this ideology's favor, focusing on the hapless mice and ducks of Disney, curiously parentless, marginalized, and always short of cash. Ariel Dorfman exposes how these characters establish hegemonic ideas about capital, race, gender, and the relationship between developed countries and the third world. A devastating indictment of a media giant, a document of 20th century political upheaval, and a reminder of the dark undercurrent of pop culture. How to Read Donald Duck is once again available, together with a new introduction. It was actually quite a notorious book in its day. Got quite some steam behind it back in the day. Potentially could be worth covering, depending on your interest.
Oh, there's a Guardian article. How recent is that article? Oh, 2018. Okay.
There's a good article in the journal about.
Okay, how to read Donald Duck imperialist ideology from the Disney comics.
Yeah, these are like Marxist interpretations, because whenever you hear ideology, that's, you know, a key argument made by Marxists, that everything we do has got ideology behind it.
Well, actually, ideas is the key word, because a lot of modern thought is obsessed with thought, the idea that a type of idealism, actually. So this word ideology is actually, it's a dumb word, which I think maybe Marx invented.
Hmm.
For example, ideology would really mean something more like the study of ideas. The real word would probably be idealism. How to Read Donald Duck, imperialist idealism in the Disney comic. And this, they do strange things to words, which I don't, you know, like they use the word methodology, which means the study of methods. Well, if you're using the method, you're using the method. But for example, Marx is of the persuasion that ideas are the dominant feature, whereas you get somebody like Schopenhauer, he's gone for the will, which is less common. He believes the will is the decisive factor. So the fascists go for Schopenhauer.
And Nietzsche.
Yeah. They're the sort of.
And I think Schopenhauer was talking about the will of the universe or nature or something to some extent. And Nietzsche turns it around and says, well, it's my will that's important. And the Nazis picked that up as the cornerstone of their ideology.
I don't know if that's exactly the case. You know, there's a lot of claim that the Nazis were influenced by Nietzsche. The thing, of course, is the Germans themselves were heavily influenced by Schopenhauer and Nietzsche and many others we don't know about. I think there's a guy called Edward Hartmann who was quite big, who's not that well known in the English-speaking world.
And they were interested in Spengler, the decline of the West. They thought everything was in decline and we had to enforce a new order, just as Nietzsche basically was calling for.
Yeah, I don't think Spengler sort of felt that we could really change things that much. He felt that to his idea, the modern Western culture arose from the ashes of the Greco-Roman culture in the Dark Ages, and the Merovingian Franks were the ones that established the basis for a new culture in Western Europe. And according to Spengler, that went through a stage of infancy, which is the Dark Ages, and then the stage of youth, which was the High Middle Ages. And then the whole period when the Europeans expand across the world was the mature stage of adulthood for this new Western culture, and exhibiting its greatest power. And what Spengler said is that, I think he said in the West that the West would succumb to the Caesar about a century after his time, which surprisingly fits Donald Trump in a way. And he said we were entering the old age of the Western culture, where all the values we cherished in the mature phase of the Western culture would sort of succumb. And I think Spengler was trying to hide that there was a mysticism here, and this is connected with the Platonic month, which goes for about 2,160 years, and he's talking about repetitions. Like if you look at the mature phase of culture that we've experienced for the last 500 years, and then you go back about 2,100 years, you're coming to the end of the Greco-Roman mature phase of culture, when they were at their greatest and most inventive and most expansive. And if you go back in time another 2,000 years, you go to the age when the Egyptians were building the pyramids. That was their great mature age of culture. So these very progressive periods last about 500 years, and they occur about every 2,000 years or so. So, for example, the roots of the Greco-Roman culture probably showed up around 1600 BC. But it was a very immature culture. You know, you had the culture of the attack on Troy. You know, you had Achilles. Achilles is the typical immature Greek warrior who only fought about, you know, martial prowess and nothing else. Now, you take something like the Battle of Hastings, and that has England sort of moving from the infancy stage of its culture to the youth phase of its culture in the High Middle Ages. The Vikings, for example, were during those times the ones that resisted Christianity. They were the ones that were holding on to the the old ways of the barbarians. I think I remember I introduced it to the term arsling. The backwards, arse in Anglo-Saxon simply means the rear. So or the backside. So if you follow the old ways of the Vikings, you're backwards. You're not going with the new ways that Christianity is introducing.
Where do people talk about the influence Roman culture had on England? Is there any good book on that? I know there were fiction books about Roman forts in England, but I don't know of any history.
Well, some of the Christian culture survived. So you had Roman Britain, which became Christian for about the last century of its existence. And it became a part of the empire which was deserted. These sub-Roman Britons, as they call them, continued to consider themselves as the inheritors of Rome. But they started getting invaded. Now, an interesting thing is, of course, the Roman British weren't so quickly overran by the Anglo-Saxons, whereas, like in Gaul, the Western Empire collapsed, and then the Franks, overran what was left of the Roman Empire in Gaul in a few years. But the British had been deserted in the year 410, and they were advised to look to their own defences. So they had about 40 years to develop some sort of military aspect of their own. And this probably explains why it took the Anglo-Saxons so long to overrun them. Of course, you have the legend of King Arthur, which became very, very influential.
And when was the Hadrian's Wall built?
I suppose under the auspices of Emperor Hadrian. I think it was an improvement on a much simpler dirt wall that had been there in the first place. So that was built back in the early 2nd century AD, so you're looking at about 130 AD or something like that. They actually didn't use that wall for that long because they rebased the borderline north of that wall for a couple of 100 years, I think, and built another line of fortifications. But later did fall back on the original Hadrian's Wall.
I heard that the wall wasn't really a defensive position. It was meant to just tax people moving from north to south and back and forth. It was a tax collection effort. It wasn't really, they weren't worried about the barbarians coming from the north.
They could break through, and the Hadrian's Wall was quite an extensive piece of work. And I think seriously it was to defend against barbarian encroachment. Well, it's the same story with the Great Wall of China. But see, the trick was they couldn't absolutely keep the barbarians out. If the barbarians were, they could probably keep smaller groups out, but if a large enough effort was made, they could capture a particular fort, and then they got a gateway into the internal lands, and they could go and raid and attack. But the huge advantage of the wall was when they were trying to get back. That if they're being pursued by forces and the barbarians are now loaded down with all their valuable loot, which they were reluctant to depart with, they were running back to a part of the wall that was perhaps manned again or had been remanned, and they were trapped. And
or they could pay a tax. They pay a tax, and then they would be let through, maybe. I don't know. Because how would they know?
Traders.
Yeah, how would they know who's a barbarian raider and who's a trader? Maybe that's why they had the wall to kind of control that situation.
It will depend how big the party is. A party which is too small wouldn't be such a great threat. You'd probably need a minimum of about 50 warriors to make a decent raiding party of any kind. Well, yeah. Generally, when you get a gang of raiders coming up to the wall, they're probably going to be pretty obvious as to who they are. But Britain was deserted by the governor who was trying to become emperor. So it was about 408 or 410. It's assumed he must have left some garrison forces behind, but they weren't enough. The trick with the later empire was generally it was broke, and they didn't maintain large forces like the earlier empire had done. So they maintains militars to in fortifications, and there's sort of a group which was a central command, which might only be a force that's only about 500 strong, but this would contain all the commanders. And those they'd hire barbarians to be their army.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what happened in at the end of the empire, that they could hire the barbarians for a short period of time and pay them, but they couldn't keep a paid force there all the time. They would have to just hire a force for any emergency and then disband it when the emergency was over. In some cases, still been unable to pay the barbarian troops, which famously led to the sack of Rome, when a barbarian army which had been hired by the Romans, they didn't pay them, and so they went on the rampage and joined with other barbarians surrounded Rome to demand their money. And famously in 14, barbarians get into the ancient and grand city of Rome. Very exciting times. I find these late Roman times, just absolutely fascinating compared to the earlier empire, which we know so much about. Sort of the romance of the late Roman Empire, when you're trying to keep this empire together and falling, and sort of very resource-wise, the late empire was broke. It just, for example, it had ran out of all a lot of the resources. An empire protects trade routes. You don't have trade, you don't have any reason for an empire. So the Romans mined the surface deposits. So, you had all the stuff like the tin, the copper, the iron, silver, all that started to run low because they couldn't go down deep enough. For a couple of 100 years ago, or 300 years ago, they invented the steam pump, and they could go to the old Roman workings and go down about 150 feet. The Romans couldn't go down very far because below a certain level, the mines become waterlogged.
Yeah.
But that's what killed Western Rome when they lost all valuable minerals, I mean, how do you supply soldiers with weapons and armor when iron's short? There were cases where people were stealing the iron, which was supposed to go as weapons and armor for the soldiers to make tools for their great farms, which made them money. Very romantic period. Yeah, I'd suggest if you ever get the chance, find works that explain the goings on of the later Roman Empire. I think you'll find it quite fascinating. And as they call it, sub-Roman, the romance of sub-Roman Britain, which trying to preserve itself against the Anglo-Saxons.
Yeah, archaeologists have found some of these locations where they found all kinds of Roman coins, and many soldiers were killed, attacked from the countryside when they were traveling with money and weapons and valuables. I guess they were trying to resupply someone and they would be attacked. And they're still finding some of these locations where the Romans were massacred.
That was actually a big problem in the late Empire, that you had these gangs that were controlling regions of the empire. You know, one barbarian who'd become a Roman general lost a battle, and he had to bribe his way to get through the Alps down into Italy with these gangs which were controlling the passes and that. And so this was another big issue, that you not only had to fight the enemy, you had to fight these internal sort of rabble as well. And of course, you know, if you had to pay troops, so you had to send gold and silver for payment to keep troops in a certain location, or keep them fighting. Anyway, I think I'll move along for this session. We've done our 2 hours. And I'll leave you all to watch videos about Charlie Kirk,
Okay.
the once and future king. Or was that Donald Trump?
King Arthur.
See you, Jason. See you,
Yep.
Dave.
See y'all.
Dave.